As I sat down at the dining table in my old Brooklyn apartment, I had no idea that dinner would become a knife plunged straight into my heart. I am Miriam Jacobs, 72 years old, once an investigative reporter for the New York Times, chasing down corrupt officials with eyes that never missed a detail. I thought I was used to lies, to false faces, but I never imagined the day would come when my own son would sit across from me, letting his wife humiliate me in this very kitchen. Rachel, my daughter-in-law, raised her wine glass, took a sip, and set it down on the table. She flashed a sweet smile, but her eyes were cold as steel. Mom, her voice came out even, sharp as a razor. This apartment could be a top-tier law office. In Brooklyn, a location like this is worth its weight in gold. It's such a waste for just you to live here. In a nice nursing home, you'd surely be better cared for, with friends to keep you company. You wouldn't be lonely anymore. Each word was like a stone thrown straight at my face. I turned to Andrew, hoping for a reaction, for him to say something simple. That's enough, Rachel. But Andrew just sat there, eyes glued to the glass in his hand, silent. I forced a smile, but inside, I was seething. So I thought, they've been planning this for a while. For a moment, I wanted to hurl the glass onto the floor, let it shatter, let them hear the scream inside me, but I held back. An investigative reporter never acts on anger. We observe, we remember, and we wait for the right moment. I stood up, excusing myself to the kitchen to prepare more coffee. My steps were slow, but my eyes were as sharp as ever. In the reflection of the glass cabinet, I caught Rachel leaning over the folder I'd left on the shelf. Her phone flashed. The camera went off. She flipped through the pages of the apartment's deed, snapping photos like a skilled thief. In less than 10 seconds, everything disappeared into her sleek leather purse, and Rachel sat back, her face innocent, as if nothing had happened. I bit my lip until it bled, but I returned with the coffee tray, pretending nothing was wrong. This apartment is where Robert and I built our life, the only legacy left after he passed, and now it was the target of my own daughter-in-law. In that moment, I understood my family was broken, and I, Miriam Jacobs, was no longer just a frail mother. I was a journalist, and I would expose the truth. If Rachel wanted war, she would get it. I couldn't sleep after that dinner. The clink of knives and forks echoed in my head like metal scraping against a wall. I sat in the dark kitchen, with only the faint yellow glow of the hanging lamp, staring into the void above the old wooden table. Everything seemed to return to a normal facade, but I knew nothing was normal anymore. Rachel hadn't just thrown out a few heartless words. She had stepped into my last stronghold, this apartment, and Andrew, my only son, had chosen silence. What hurt most was remembering how Rachel came into our lives. The first day Andrew brought her home, she sat on the sofa, smiling, calling me her second mom. I remember her honeyed voice, like syrup in my ears. "I've never had anyone care for me like you do," she said, holding my hand like a dutiful daughter. I believed her. I thought that finally, after years of living in the loneliness of widowhood, I'd have a daughter to share with. I even opened the cabinet, gave her a scarf I'd knitted myself, and said, "Consider it a small dowry from Mom." Rachel hugged me tightly, her eyes sparkling. I was so moved I shed tears. But then, the first signs appeared. Andrew began to change. He stopped calling me on Sunday mornings, like he used to. When we talked, he'd pause, as if looking to Rachel before speaking. Every word out of Andrew's mouth sounded familiar, not because they were his, but because they echoed Rachel. Phrases like, "Mom should think about the future." "At this age, Mom needs professional care." All Rachel's words, coming from Andrew's mouth. I looked at my son and saw the shadow of a puppet. One afternoon, while watering plants on the balcony, I heard Rachel's voice drifting from the living room. The window was cracked open, and I held my breath to listen. She was on the phone with someone. I didn't catch everything, but a few words hit me like a slap. Legal documents, Brooklyn real estate, ownership, transfer. My heart pounded. I knew enough legal jargon to understand. She was preparing paperwork related to this apartment. The apartment Robert sweated his whole life to secure for us. The apartment where I was now being treated like a tenant in my own home. I retreated to my room, shutting the door tightly, my heart racing. The old reporter's instincts kicked in, urging me to analyze. I started jotting notes in my old notebook, like back when I investigated a bank scandal. Date overheard Rachel talking about legal documents, real estate. I knew once someone starts talking about paperwork, the plot has gone beyond cruel dinner table remarks. A few days later, the first twist emerged. While cleaning the living room, I found an envelope left slightly open on the table. I recognized Andrew's handwriting instantly. It was a copy of a financial guarantee contract. Signer Andrew Jacobs. Guaranteed party, Rachel Jacobs. My hands trembled as I read. If Rachel defaulted on a debt, Andrew would be responsible. And if Andrew went bankrupt, who would be dragged into it? Me. Because Andrew still used this apartment's address, and I had co-signed some old documents to help him get a loan. I sank into a chair. My whole body went cold. Rachel didn't just want this apartment. She had entangled Andrew in shady financial deals, and if it all collapsed, I'd be pulled down with them. I realized the apartment wasn't just a target. It was collateral in Rachel's game. In that moment, pain gave way to cold clarity. I had exposed officials far smarter than Rachel. I had survived threats, anonymous calls, men tailing me on the street. If I could bring down a mayor with a single forged stamp, I could certainly handle my daughter-in-law. I folded the contract, placed it back exactly as it was, but inside a decision was made. I would no longer stay silent. Rachel thought she could turn me into a senile old woman, signing papers blindly. Her biggest mistake was forgetting I'd spent a lifetime spotting the smallest signs of deceit, and this time, I'd use those skills against her. That dinner was just the beginning. Now I knew my family was being invaded from within, and if Andrew didn't have the strength to stand by me, I'd stand alone. Miriam Jacobs, still had eyes that saw, ears that heard, and a mind that could never be bought. Rachel thought I was old and weak, but that would make her underestimate me. And in this game, underestimation would be the most dangerous weapon. One Thursday morning, as I sipped black coffee at the kitchen table, the doorbell rang urgently. I flinched slightly. I wasn't expecting anyone. Opening the door, I faced a man in a white shirt, a cheap plastic name tag clipped to his pocket. He flashed a professional smile, too forced, his voice flat. Mrs. Miriam Jacobs, I'm a social worker from the city. We received a report that you're showing signs of inability to care for yourself. I'm here to check and handle some necessary procedures. I froze, unable to care for myself. The words hit like a hammer. Who sent this report? I didn't need to ask. Rachel. The man handed me a stack of papers, stamped with the New York Social Services Agency logo. My eyes narrowed slightly. The font on the stamp looked odd, printed from a computer, not the traditional embossed ink I'd seen for decades as a reporter. The spacing between the letters and the border was off, misaligned. I pretended to tremble as I held the papers, playing the confused old lady. Oh, I don't understand. I'm perfectly healthy. There must be a mistake. I let my voice quiver, like a frail prey, to put him at ease. But inside, my veins were pulsing. I scanned the fine print at the bottom. If you need assistance, please call 212-597-49X. I breathed slowly, grabbed the landline right there, and dialed the number in front of him. A moment of silence. Then, the phone rang from the man's own coat pocket. The sound was like an explosion. He fumbled, eyes darting, then quickly silenced the phone, faking a coughing fit to cover it up. I set the receiver down, staring straight at him. Seems your phone is quite in sync with the city's hotline. He flushed, stammering, must be a system glitch. I flashed the smile I used years ago when grilling politicians on camera, half kind, half icy. I slowly pulled out a chair, gesturing for him to sit, but my voice was steel. Can you explain to me what kind of system glitch makes a government hotline ring straight to your pocket? He quickly changed the subject, opening his briefcase to pull out more forms. I watched closely, glossy white paper. Unlike anything government offices use, a few typos lingered. Disability instead of disability. Fools thought a 72-year-old woman wouldn't notice. but I'd lived my life hunting these tiny details. I didn't call him out immediately. I did what any seasoned investigative reporter would. I played weaker. I softened my voice. "Oh, if I'm really not sound of mind, what should I do? You'll help me, right?" His eyes lit up, thinking he'd won. "Yes, you just need to sign here. We'll arrange to move you to a suitable facility this week. And about this apartment, a lawyer will handle the legal procedures." I smiled, gently placing my hand on the papers, pulling them toward me. "Wonderful, but I have an old habit. I verify sources. You know, I used to be an investigative reporter, and I never sign anything without checking first." His smile vanished. He fumbled, gathering his papers, muttering, "Maybe I'll come back later, when you're ready." I nodded politely, opening the door. "Of course, thanks for coming. Be careful not to forget your government phone." He scurried down the stairs, not daring to look back. When the door slammed shut, I stood there, hand on my chest. My heart raced, but not from fear. It was adrenaline, a feeling I hadn't had in years, the thrill of touching a real conspiracy. I looked around the apartment, once peaceful, now a battlefield. Rachel didn't just want me out. She'd hired a fake social worker, forged documents, planned to force me out. This wasn't just a family dispute. This was a calculated crime. I walked to the living room, pulled my old investigation notebook from the drawer. On the first page, I wrote, "Date. A man posing as a social worker came to the house. Fake documents. Fake phone number. Real conspiracy." I punctuated the sentence, looked up, and whispered to myself, "If they want a fight, I'll give them one. I'm no longer the gentle, frail mother. I'm Miriam Jacobs, and I'm fighting back." I sat back in the living room, my investigation notebook open before me, the bitter smell of cold coffee rising sharply. The name of that fake social worker echoed in my mind, along with his ridiculous stamp and the phone number that rang straight to his pocket. I closed my eyes briefly and suddenly recalled my years at the New York Times newsroom, where I was a bloodhound, sniffing out lies from miles away. I vividly remembered a case that put my career on the front page. A prominent senator boasted about his prestigious university degree, his credentials built like a fortress. But I found a tiny typo in a copy of his diploma. University printed as university. One misplaced letter brought his entire career crashing down. When I published, the political system shook. Back then, I learned a truth. Cheaters may be good at hiding, but they always slip up on the small details, and details are my weapon. I opened my notebook, adding a new line, "Don't let emotions cloud judgment. Investigate Rachel, like a subject in a news story." I took a deep breath, regaining my clarity. Rachel was no longer just my daughter-in-law. She was a suspect. My plan started with gathering. I quietly observed, noting every time Rachel made a call at my house, she always lowered her voice when mentioning apartment, documents, or legal. I recorded the times, frequency, her demeanor. I checked the trash after every dinner they had here. People think trash is worthless, but I know it always tells the truth. And as expected, I found scraps of Rachel's discarded notes, some bank numbers, a scrawled phrase, title transfer. One night, when Andrew stopped by to pick up some papers Rachel forgot, I deliberately sat at my desk, pretending to be engrossed in an old book, but my eyes didn't leave the USB plugged into Andrew's laptop. My son thought I wasn't paying attention, but I caught a glimpse of the screen. In a drafts folder, an unsent email had a clear subject line, "Power of Attorney draft, for Rachel." My throat went dry. Andrew, my own son, had written that email. I only saw the first few lines, but it was enough to understand it was a draft power of attorney, giving Rachel full legal and financial control on my behalf. Andrew quickly unplugged the USB, pretending he couldn't find what he needed, then awkwardly said goodbye and left. I sat frozen, as if I'd just heard a death sentence. When the door closed, I opened my notebook, writing in firm, jagged strokes. They don't just want to push me into a nursing home. They want to seize everything, legalized by paperwork. My heart pounded, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was the drumbeat of battle. I stood, walked to the bookshelf, and pulled down an old wooden box. Inside were relics of my reporting days, a small recorder, a digital camera, and a few worn press badges. I'd put them away, thinking I'd never use them again, but now, they were weapons. I began collecting evidence systematically. I committed the email draft to memory, sketching it on paper. I recorded Rachel's words, her hints about transfers. I knew that to fight a lawyer like Rachel, I needed more than emotions. I needed raw, documented truth. That night, I sat by the window, the dim streetlight filtering through the old curtains. I thought of Robert. He once told me, "Miriam, you were born to see what others miss." I whispered into the darkness, "Robert, I won't let them take our home. I swear." I decided I wouldn't just defend. I would investigate. I would expose, and I'd do it the way I do best, clinging to every tiny detail until their entire web of lies tore apart. Rachel thought I was old, my memory fading, my eyes weak, my hands shaky. But the mistake of the overconfident is underestimating their opponent. I was no longer the old mom they could manipulate. I was Miriam Jacobs, investigative reporter, and I had just found the first clue in the biggest case of my life, the case called family. I began taking action the next morning. As the dim sunlight filtered into the apartment through the dusty window, I placed a tiny thumb-sized microphone on the table, the kind I used to record high-stakes interviews during my reporting years. It still worked. It just needed new batteries. I carefully tucked it behind the orchid pot in the corner of the living room, where Rachel often sat to make calls when she came over. I knew that once she felt safe, she'd reveal what I needed. That afternoon, Rachel arrived. Andrew came along, but quickly left to meet a friend, as his wife put it. I was used to his absences by now. Andrew was less and less on my side, and each silence from him only pushed me further away from the son I'd sacrificed everything for. Rachel sat on the sofa, pulling out her phone, her voice syrupy, but her eyes ice cold. I pretended to be cooking in the kitchen, but my ears were sharp, like a panther stalking prey. My microphone captured every word clearly. "Yeah, I'm at her place now. No issues. This apartment is perfect. Prime location. Once she's gone, we can sell it for at least 1.2 million. Guaranteed." I froze, the knife in my hand nearly slipping from the cutting board. Once she's gone, she meant me. I forced myself to breathe deeply, continuing to chop onions, but my eyes blurred with tears and the sting. Rachel paused, then lowered her voice, her next words twisting the knife deeper. "Don't worry. I know a doctor who can sign off on a fake medical report. Just a few lines saying she's no longer competent, and the process will be a breeze. Then the ownership will be mine, and Andrew won't dare object." I stood rooted to the spot. This wasn't just a scheme to push me out, or a greedy grab for the apartment. This was a calculated plot. Real estate brokers, a fake doctor, forged documents. Rachel had planned it all. I returned to the table, turning on the gas stove to mask my pounding heart. I wanted to rush out, scream in her face that I knew everything, but I held back. A journalist doesn't rush. Evidence is the only weapon that matters. And now, I had my first recording. When Rachel left, leaving behind the sharp scent of her perfume in the living room, I locked the door and rushed to the orchid pot. I retrieved the microphone, plugged in the earphones, and replayed the recording. Rachel's voice came through crystal clear. "Once she's gone, we can sell it for at least 1.2 million, and then, I know a doctor who can sign off on a fake medical report." I shuddered. Goosebumps prickled my skin. These weren't idle words. This was a meticulously staged conspiracy. I realized I wasn't Rachel's only victim. Someone willing to use a fake doctor and colluding brokers was no stranger to scams. I sank onto the sofa, where minutes earlier Rachel had casually calculated $1 million profit on my head. My hands trembled on my lap. This apartment held every memory of Robert and me. I could hear his laughter when we first moved in, could picture little Andrew running in circles, shouting as his toy train chugged along its tracks. And now, those memories were being weighed as $1.2 million. I wiped my tears and opened my notebook. On a new page, I wrote boldly, "Evidence #1, Rachel recording, broker, content, sell apartment for 1.2 million, fake medical report, known doctor." I stopped writing, staring at the words. For a moment, I felt like I was back in the old newsroom, amid the clatter of keyboards, the thick smell of coffee, and the pressure of crushing deadlines. I was Miriam Jacobs again, the woman who never feared confronting power. But this time, my enemy wasn't a corrupt senator or a financial tycoon. This time, my enemy sat at my dining table, slept beside my son, and called me Mom. I closed the notebook, my eyes gleaming in the dark. Rachel thought I was just a senile, frail old woman, easily led. But her biggest mistake was underestimating my memory and instincts. I had my first piece of evidence, and I swore it wouldn't be the last. This war had just begun. That evening, I sat quietly in the living room, the yellow lamplight casting shadows on my thickening notebook. In my hand, the tiny microphone was still warm from the battery, holding my first piece of evidence against Rachel. But I couldn't do this alone. I needed someone behind me, another pair of eyes, another mind, and most importantly, a way to bring this story to light. I opened a drawer and found an old worn business card, its ink faded. Daniel Ross, investigative editor, New York Times. Daniel had been a colleague, a mentor in the trade. He was the one who taught me a truth is only worth something when it's proven and published. If it stays in a drawer, it dies. I picked up the phone, my hands trembling, and dialed. After 3 rings, a deep, familiar voice answered. Hello, Daniel Ross here. Daniel, it's me, Miriam Jacobs. A brief silence, then his voice lit up, surprised and warm. Miriam, my God, it's been years. I thought you'd retired from the game. I thought so too, until my own family turned into a case. I recounted briefly, my voice steady, like a news report. Rachel wanted the apartment, hired a fake social worker, talked to a broker about the sale price, even had a doctor friend to sign a fake medical report. Daniel listened without interrupting, only the sound of his pen tapping rhythmically on his desk coming through. Finally, he spoke. Miriam, you know I can't jump in based on just a story, but if you really have evidence, recordings, documents, photos, then we could turn this into a bombshell. I took a deep breath and said, I have it. I recorded Rachel's own words, and I'm not stopping. I'll gather more. Daniel chuckled softly, half in admiration, half in disbelief. 72 years old, and still hunting like the old days. Miriam, you haven't changed. I gave a wry smile, unable to hide the bitterness. The only difference is this time, the prey is in my own family. Daniel paused, then lowered his voice. There's something you need to know. At the newsroom, we're working on a series about a network targeting elderly people's assets. They use legal tricks, colluding doctors, real estate brokers, to steal homes from seniors living alone. We've got a few names, but we're missing a key link. If Rachel's involved, you're not just fighting your daughter-in-law, you're up against a whole operation. I gripped the phone, my heart pounding. A chill ran down my spine. What did this mean? Rachel didn't come up with these tricks on her own. She could be just a pawn in a larger scheme. Daniel, are you sure? You think Rachel's a link? Hard to say, but the way you describe it matches the pattern we're tracking. Move the victim to a nursing home, forge documents to strip their rights, then sell the property. Your story fits every detail. I went quiet for a few seconds. Until now, I'd seen this as a family tragedy, a greedy daughter-in-law, a weak son. But if Daniel was right, this wasn't just betrayal, it was a predatory system targeting the elderly as easy prey. And I, Miriam Jacobs, had stumbled into being a living witness. Daniel, I said slowly, my voice hoarse, I think I can give you more than a story. I can give you evidence. I'll keep gathering, but I need your promise. When I have enough, you'll publish. You have my word, Daniel replied firmly. And Miriam, be careful. If you're really touching this network, they don't just want your apartment. They might want to silence you. I gave a faint smile, half self-mocking, half defiant. You forgot? I've survived threatening calls, being followed in the dark. I'm not easily silenced. They'll regret picking the wrong prey. As I hung up, I sat for a long time, staring into the darkness outside the window. Brooklyn buzzed with the sound of cars, but inside me, a different silence rose. No longer the loneliness of a widow, no longer the humiliation of a mother scorned by her daughter-in-law. This had become a societal case. I closed my notebook, adding one final line, not just family, This is a network, and I will expose it. In that moment, I knew I'd found a reason to stand tall again, not just to save this home, but to fight for all the other seniors being treated as merchandise, waiting to be stripped. And I, Miriam Jacobs, wouldn't miss this chance. On Monday morning, the doorbell rang urgently. I glanced through the peephole. Rachel stood outside, holding a folder, accompanied by the fake social worker. I took a deep breath, opened the door with a calm smile. "Come in, it's chilly out." As I turned, I discreetly activated the microphone behind the orchid pot and positioned my phone to record from the bookshelf. Rachel marched into the living room, placing the stack of papers on the table. Her voice was even, sweet but cold. "Mom, these are preliminary court papers. The Social Services Agency has been authorized to oversee your condition. If you sign to confirm, the process will move faster, and you'll soon be cared for in a suitable nursing home." I pretended to flip through the papers, my eyes scanning quickly. The round stamp was in a computer font, and Supreme Court was missing half a line. I looked up, feigning innocence. "Oh, so this is an ex-parte order? Usually there's a notice to the party involved, right?" The social worker looked puzzled, glancing at Rachel. She pursed her lips and responded, "In emergencies it can be ex-parte." I pointed to page 3. "Strange. There's a box checked here for notified via certified mail, but the recipient's name is blank. Printing error?" A flash of unease crossed their faces. Rachel pulled the papers back, forcing a smile. "Just a form error, Mom." I sipped my coffee, continuing in a doddering tone. "Rachel, I watch a lot of Law and Order. Power of attorney and guardianship are different, right?" I get confused. Rachel stiffened for a second, then quickly replied, "They're both for someone else to manage your assets." "Same thing." I gave a faint smile. "Oh, so they're the same. Interesting. Because I recall a power of attorney can be revoked any time. Guardianship requires court intervention. Seems like these concepts got mixed up here." This time Rachel took a few seconds to muster a smile. I knew the microphone had captured enough. I picked up the landline, dialed the police, and said clearly, "I suspect someone's impersonating an official with questionable documents. Please send a unit to verify." Rachel shot up. "Mom, what are you doing? It's just a small matter, and you're calling the police." I smiled. "If your papers are legit, the police will confirm it for you." Within 10 minutes, 2 officers knocked. They examined the court papers, inspected the stamp, and asked the man for his credentials. He produced a blurry plastic ID in a format long discontinued. One officer frowned. "This model's outdated, possibly fake." Rachel jumped in. "Officers, my mother-in-law is elderly, often confused. I'm a lawyer. I have the right to represent her. This is just a health evaluation, entirely for her benefit." I crossed my arms. Calm. "Great. Then please state your bar number and law firm clearly. I have a habit of recording for reference." The room fell silent. I saw the officers exchange glances, suspicion dawning. The female officer's phone buzzed. She read it, then looked up. "The bar number is valid, but the law firm's address doesn't match the registered one." Rachel quickly defended. "I recently moved offices." The officer nodded, collecting the papers. "For now, Mrs. Jacobs doesn't need to sign anything until we verify. We'll file a report." Rachel pursed her lips, gathered her things. As she reached the door, she turned back, her eyes like daggers, but forced a smile. "Mom, I'm sorry if I scared you. I'll do it again, properly." I replied softly, almost playfully. "Properly, yes, and with correct spelling. Disability isn't disability. Even a confused old lady like me can spot that." Rachel's face paled slightly. She gripped her bag until her knuckles whitened, then left quietly. The apartment fell silent again. The young officer turned to me, half smiling, half serious. "Mrs. Jacobs, you seem to know exactly what you're doing. If they come back, call us right away." I nodded, tucking their card into my notebook. When the door closed, I removed the microphone, turned off the camera. The recording was enough to plant seeds of doubt, but I hadn't used the broker tape or mentioned the fake doctor report. I let them think I was weak, just a cranky or scared old lady. The more they underestimated me, the more they'd slip. And I, Miriam Jacobs, had spent a lifetime learning to wait for the perfect moment to strike. After that dramatic morning, the apartment sank back into silence. But I knew this quiet was just a breathless pause before another storm. Rachel wouldn't give up easily, and Andrew, my only son, would surely show up soon, caught between two sides, torn between his wife and his mother. As I predicted, the next afternoon, Andrew knocked. He didn't bring flowers or the sheepish smile of the boy who used to mess up. He walked in, his frame thin, shoulders heavy, as if weighed down by something. "Mom," Andrew began, his voice hoarse. "I'm sorry about yesterday." Rachel was just a bit heated. I set my teacup down, looking straight into his eyes. "You were there, Andrew. You saw her bring fake court papers. You heard the police express their doubts, and you stayed silent." Andrew lowered his head. "Mom, I just didn't want to make things worse. Rachel, she thinks everything you're doing is because someone's manipulating you. She's worried you'll be taken advantage of." I gave a faint laugh. "Taken advantage of? Andrew, for the past 3 years, who's been paying your rent? Who covered Rachel's overdue credit card bills? Who paid the small hospital fees you two should have handled? Am I the one being taken advantage of? Or is it someone else?" Andrew didn't answer. He twisted the wedding ring on his finger, his gaze drifting somewhere beyond the window. I recognized that silence, so familiar it pierced my heart. It was the silence of a son who had become his wife's shadow. After he left, I decided to check the pile of unopened mail stuffed in the drawer near the door. I usually ignored unfamiliar envelopes, assuming they were ads or utility bills. But this time, a thicker envelope, clearly marked First National Bank in the top left corner, made me pause. I opened it, my eyes scanning the cold text quickly. A notice of overdue debt. Borrower: Andrew Jacobs. Guarantor: Rachel Jacobs. Collateral: apartment number. I froze. This very apartment. My home. My hands shook, not from age, but from the anger tightening my chest. Rachel wasn't just trying to push me out. She had used Andrew's name to take out a large loan, putting my apartment up as collateral, and Andrew had signed. I pictured the scene, Rachel handing him the contract, speaking sweet words, while Andrew, my son, whom I raised, put pen to paper without even asking me. One signature, and my future was placed in someone else's hands. When Andrew returned that evening to talk more, I slid the envelope toward him. "Explain." Andrew paled. "Mom, I was going to tell you, but I cut him off," my voice icy. "But you signed. You let your wife use this apartment to secure a loan. Do you know what that means, Andrew? If she doesn't pay, the bank will take my home." Andrew clutched his head, his voice choked. "I just wanted to help Rachel. She said it was temporary, that she'd figure it out. Mom, I'm caught between you two." I looked at him, my heart cracking. "No, Andrew, you're not caught between us. You chose, and you chose silence." He looked up, his eyes red, as if searching for a hug, a way out. But in that moment, I no longer saw the little boy who ran circles in the park, clinging to my hand, shouting, "Mom, wait for me." Before me was a grown man, so weak he let his wife decide the fate of our family. I stepped back, feeling the distance between us turn into a chasm. I whispered, almost to myself, "I've lost you, Andrew. Not today. But the day you started treating silence as your way of dealing with me." Andrew stammered, but found no words. He stood, shoulders heavy, and quietly left the apartment. When the door closed, I sat on the sofa, clutching the bank envelope. Tears spilled, not from fear of losing the apartment, but from something worse, losing the son I once believed was my last pillar of support. I sat there for a long time, until darkness swallowed the room, and in that darkness, I made a vow: if Andrew chose silence, I would choose to speak. If he let others lead him, I would stand on my own. I no longer had a son to rely on. I had only myself, and that was enough to fight. In the days after that cold conversation with Andrew, I thought I'd hit rock bottom, but Rachel showed me the real bottom was still deeper. One morning, as I swept the porch, Mrs. Wilson, my downstairs neighbor, approached, holding a gray envelope, her brow furrowed, her voice hesitant. "Miriam, I got this. It was slipped into my mailbox. I think you should know." I opened it. A sheet of paper, printed in cheap Times New Roman, no sender listed. The contents were brief, but cut like a knife. The woman in apartment 5B is no longer sound of mind. She screams and curses her family every night, disturbing the entire building. Be cautious. She may be dangerous. I crumpled the paper in my fist. I had never screamed at night, never disturbed anyone. But now, in the eyes of my neighbors, seeds of doubt had been sown. Rachel didn't just want my apartment. She wanted to ruin my reputation, to paint me as a crazed old woman to the whole community. That afternoon, I received a letter from an unfamiliar law firm. On behalf of Rachel Jacobs, we are concerned about the mental state of our client, Miriam Jacobs. We recommend an independent medical evaluation. I gave a wry smile. Rachel had officially hired lawyers to build her story. I called Daniel, my voice trembling with anger. They've started their campaign, smearing me, fabricating stories, lawyers, and all. He replied, his voice grave, as I feared. This is phase 2 of their pattern. Isolate the victim by destroying their credibility. You have to stay calm, Miriam. The evidence will expose them. That evening, I decided to check the security camera system I'd installed years ago. I turned on the monitor, intending to review the footage to ensure I wasn't being falsely accused. But what I found chilled my blood. Some video segments had been replaced. On the screen, I saw myself, blurry, shaky, standing in the living room, screaming, flailing like a madwoman. But I knew that night, I had slept soundly, until morning. The video was fake, stitched together. I rewound, watching closely. There were cuts in the footage, the room's lighting flickering inconsistently. Someone had hacked the camera system, inserting fake footage to make it look like I was out of control. I sat frozen, hands on my head. God, they weren't just spreading lies. They were manufacturing evidence to make me a deranged old woman in court. At that moment, the phone rang. I picked up, and an unfamiliar voice spoke. Mrs. Jacobs, we've received complaints that you've been causing disturbances at night. We need you to cooperate with a voluntary mental health evaluation. I knew this wasn't a random call. It was the next link in the chain. I responded coldly. Do you have a court order? We hope you'll cooperate. I hung up. That night, I barely slept. I replayed the fake video in my mind, my hands flailing, my mouth wide, the audio mixed with howling wind. Miriam Jacobs, who had exposed powerful frauds, had become a victim of the same tactics. But then fear turned into a blaze of anger. I opened my notebook and wrote firmly. Evidence #2, smear campaign, anonymous letter, lawyers, hacked camera, inserted fake video, conspiracy phase 2. I looked up at Robert's photo on the shelf. Robert, they think they can drag me into the mud. But I'm still here. I'll show them who the real mad one is in this game. As the first light broke through the window, a plan formed in my mind. If Rachel wanted to make me a laughingstock in the neighborhood, I would make her a spectacle across the city. And I knew who would help me. Daniel, with the pen of journalism, and old colleagues who still believed in the truth. The smear campaign had begun, but they didn't know. They'd just given me the perfect reason to strike back with everything I'd learned in my life as a reporter. I was used to smear tactics. In my reporting days, targets of my investigations spread lies about me, claiming I took bribes or held personal grudges. But I stood firm because the truth was always my sharpest weapon. This time was no different. Rachel had touched my domain, fabricating stories, forging evidence, but she didn't know I'd spent my life mastering this game. That evening, I called Daniel. I sent him the recording of Rachel discussing the apartment sale and mentioning the doctor friend. He listened, silent for a long moment, then said, Miriam, do you realize the value of this? If published, it's not just a family matter. It's a piece of the puzzle in the asset theft network we're tracking, I replied, my voice resolute. I'll show the public, but first, I need to set a trap. We devised a plan. Daniel would publish an online draft article on the paper's secondary page, not official, just a leak, about a Brooklyn woman, targeted by her lawyer daughter-in-law, linked to a network stealing seniors' assets. No names directly mentioned, but the description was too close to Rachel for her to stay calm. The next morning, the draft appeared. Within hours, I got a text from Andrew. Mom, what are you doing? Rachel's freaking out. I didn't respond. As I predicted, that afternoon, Rachel showed up. She wasn't alone. With her were the fake social worker and a man in a suit, the real estate broker I'd heard in the recording. Rachel's face was taut, but her smile was plastered on like a mask. "Mom, we need to talk now," she said, pulling out a chair at the table. "The press thing is just a misunderstanding, but to avoid trouble, it's best you sign these papers so I can manage the apartment and ensure your safety." The social worker placed a stack of papers on the table, tapping his fingers impatiently. The broker leaned against the door, looking like a predator waiting for exhausted prey. I smiled gently, setting a teapot on the table. "Wonderful. You came at the perfect time. We have witnesses today." Rachel frowned. "Witnesses?" Right then, the door opened. 2 police officers walked in, the same pair from before, followed by Daniel and 2 young reporters, cameras dangling from their necks. Rachel froze for a second. "Mom, you called the press?" she hissed. I sat down slowly, my gaze sharp as a blade. "Yes, because this is no longer a family matter. This is a scam." The social worker stepped back, his face pale. The broker grimaced, moving toward the door, but was blocked by an officer. Rachel tried to stay composed, pushing the papers toward me. "Mom, don't make a scene. Sign here. It's the best solution for everyone." I didn't touch the papers. Instead, I pressed a button on the small remote hidden in my hand. From the Bluetooth speaker on the bookshelf, Rachel's voice rang out, clear as day. "Once she's gone, we can sell it for at least $1.2 million. Don't worry, I know a doctor who can sign off on a fake medical report." The room exploded. The reporters' cameras flashed nonstop. The officers stood, their eyes cold as ice. The broker retreated to a corner, sweating. The social worker blurted, I was just following her orders." Rachel went pale, but held firm. "That's edited. She faked the tape. She's lost her mind." Daniel stepped forward, his voice cutting like a scalpel. "We have the original file, stored on a secure device, with timestamps and location. The court will verify. But for now, this recording is enough to prove intent to defraud." One officer pulled out handcuffs, his voice firm. "Rachel Jacobs, you're under arrest for suspected fraud, document forgery, and conspiracy to seize assets. You have the right to remain silent." The cold click of metal echoed as the cuffs locked around Rachel's wrists. Her arrogant smile vanished, replaced by raw panic. She screamed, "Andrew will save me. I have a lawyer. You'll all regret this." I sat still, my hands on the old wooden table, feeling its smooth surface tremble under my fingertips. For the first time in years, I felt this apartment was truly safe. The broker bowed his head, muttering, "I was just doing my job. I didn't know it was this serious." The officer snapped, "You'll have a chance to explain at the station." Daniel turned to me, his eyes full of respect. "Miriam, you just broke a key link. You didn't just save your home, you helped us crack open a whole network." I nodded, giving a tired smile. "Robert once told me, you were born to see what others miss." Today, I just did exactly that. As the police led Rachel and her accomplices away, the room filled with camera flashes, I knew I'd won the first battle. But deep in my heart, a void ached. I thought of Andrew, not here, not calling, not standing by me. I knew my son would have to witness his wife in handcuffs, and that pain might tear him apart. But the truth always has a price. That night, I sat alone by the window, watching the streetlights reflect on the wall. I wrote in my notebook, Evidence #3, public recording. Rachel Jacobs, arrested on the spot. Smear campaign failed. I set the pen down, closed my eyes and whispered, "The game has only just begun." When the door closed behind Rachel and her accomplices, I thought I could breathe a sigh of relief. But less than 15 minutes later, the doorbell rang again. This time, it was Andrew. He burst in like a lost soul, eyes red, hair disheveled, his shirt half-buttoned. "Mom," his voice trembled. "What did you just do?" "Rachel, they handcuffed her in front of everyone. The whole neighborhood will know. She's my wife." I sat still, my hand resting on the open notebook. I looked at my son, but I no longer saw the little boy who used to chase me in the park. Before me was a confused, weak man, lost in his own life. Andrew, I said, my voice even and cold. You haven't lost your wife. You lost yourself the day you chose silence. He stepped back, his face pale as if slapped. Mom, I just didn't know what to do. I didn't want to lose both sides. I thought Rachel was just angry, exaggerating. I didn't believe she'd actually. I cut him off, my voice sharp as a blade. You knew. Andrew looked up, his lips trembling. Mom, you heard her talk about the apartment, about documents, multiple times. You knew she wanted to use me to secure a loan, to transfer ownership. You knew it all, but you thought it was just talk. Andrew, don't you see? Your silence gave her power. He dropped his hands, collapsing into a chair, his face buried in his palms. I heard her discuss the nursing home with a friend. I thought it was just angry words. I didn't think she'd go through with it. I was wrong. I gave a faint, bitter smile. Wrong? You call that wrong? You're my son, Andrew. You once swore to Dad you'd protect me when he was gone. But when you saw your wife use this house as collateral, you stayed silent. When you saw her fabricate documents, you just watched. Don't call it wrong. It's betrayal. Andrew looked up, his eyes bloodshot. Mom, don't say that. I never wanted to hurt you. I thought things wouldn't go that far. You thought? I shook my head. Reporters like me don't live on thoughts. We live on truth. And the truth is, you let your wife trap me. The truth is, you signed a loan agreement, using this apartment as collateral. The truth is, you left me to fight alone. He bowed his head, unable to argue. The apartment felt drained of air, with only the ticking of the wall clock breaking the silence. I looked at my son, my own flesh and blood, and my heart grew heavy. A mother's love, no matter how deep, couldn't erase the wound of betrayal. I stood and stepped closer. Andrew looked up, a flicker of hope in his eyes. Maybe he expected me to hug him, to forgive him as I had so many times before. But I only placed a hand on his shoulder and said slowly, Andrew, I love you, but I can't trust you anymore. You didn't just lose your wife, you lost yourself, and I've lost you. His shoulders shook, and he tried to speak, but couldn't. Finally, he stood, gave me one last shattered look, and quietly left. The door closed, leaving me in the familiar but emptier than ever apartment. I sat down, my eyes sweeping the room, the walls unchanged, the furniture the same, but the feeling in my heart, utterly different. I no longer had a son to lean on. I had only myself, and the truth. I opened my notebook and wrote a new line. Evidence #4. Andrew admitted he knew, did nothing. Silence, the final betrayal. As I closed the notebook, tears welled up, hot and heavy. But this time, I didn't crumble. I cried for a permanent loss, then wiped my face and lifted my head. I knew that if I couldn't rely on Andrew, I'd have to walk this path alone, but strong. And I knew the battle with Rachel and the network behind her wasn't over. But from this moment, I wasn't fighting to keep my son by my side. I was fighting for one thing, justice. After the day Andrew walked away, I realized that this apartment, filled with memories, was now just a shell. Every wall, every window reminded me of betrayal. Robert was gone. My son was no longer my anchor, and predators had stepped into this home to calculate its $1 million value. I'd won a battle, but I didn't want to spend my remaining years among ashes. I called an independent real estate agency and signed a contract to sell the Brooklyn apartment, not to Rachel, not to the bank, but for myself, at full market value. On the day I signed the transfer papers, my hand trembled slightly, but not from regret. It was the tremble of liberation. Holding the check, I thought of Robert and whispered, I kept it from falling into their hands. Now I can move on. I chose Maine, a small coastal town where Robert and I had vacationed years ago. There, no one knew me as the mother betrayed by her daughter-in-law. No neighbors whispered about madness, just the sea breeze, the smell of salt, and the cries of gulls like a song of freedom. I bought a small wooden house overlooking the bay. The new home was simple, but every grain of wood, every creak of the floor, belonged to me, untouchable by anyone. But I wasn't just seeking refuge. I knew my story was only one piece of a larger puzzle. Rachel couldn't have devised those tricks alone. Fake court papers, a complicit doctor, a network of brokers. There had to be others behind her. I couldn't rest easy just because I'd escaped, so I established a fund called the Guardian Project. I used part of the apartment sale money to start it, hiring reputable lawyers and young volunteers. The goal: provide legal support for seniors targeted by children, relatives, or strangers trying to seize their assets. I wanted others like me not to have to fight alone. At the Guardian Project's launch, I spoke to a small group of local lawyers and reporters. We've heard too many stories of the elderly being treated as burdens, but they're not burdens. They're memories, foundations. If we don't protect them, we deny our own roots. The applause rang out, and I felt my eyes light up after years of darkness. One afternoon, returning from a fund meeting, I found a strange envelope in my mailbox. No sender's address. I opened it. Inside was a typed note, just one line. "Thank you, Mrs. Jacobs. I almost lost my home to a group like Rachel's. This is part of the evidence, hoping it helps you go further." Attached was a small USB drive. I plugged it into my computer. Inside were dozens of documents, loan contracts, forged certificates, scanned signatures, all different. They shared one thing: they targeted elderly people living alone in Brooklyn, Queens, and even New Jersey. I saw unfamiliar names, but the pattern was identical to what Rachel had used on me. I sat still, hand on the mouse, heart pounding. Part of me wanted to stop, to live peacefully in Maine, reading books, tending a garden. But the investigative reporter in me wouldn't allow it. This wasn't just Miriam Jacobs' story anymore. It was a network. I called Daniel. His voice grew grave as I told him about the USB. "Miriam, do you realize what this is? It's gold. Evidence of a systemic fraud network. We can write a series, take them to court, but it'll be dangerous. Are you ready?" I looked out the window, the sea glowing red in the sunset. I closed my eyes, recalling Andrew's disappointed gaze, the moment Rachel was handcuffed, the years I spent writing to defend justice. I opened my eyes, my voice firm. I've never been more ready. I knew I was stepping into a new war. The Guardian Project was just the beginning. I wouldn't stop until those who saw the elderly as prey bowed before justice. I closed the laptop, locked the USB in a safe. Outside, waves crashed against the rocks, echoing like a drumbeat. I smiled. No longer a victim, no longer a scorned old mother. Miriam Jacobs, had been reborn, and this time, I was back as myself, an investigative reporter, holding a torch to illuminate the truth. Maine gave me a peace Brooklyn never could. Every morning I brewed coffee, opened the window to let the sea breeze rush in, and listened to the gulls chatter like a song heralding a new day. But I knew this peace wasn't the end. It was a beginning. I'd come too far, endured too much loss, to sit back and watch that dark network keep hunting. One June day, I received an invitation from a local law school. They were hosting a seminar on preventing financial abuse of the elderly and wanted me to share my experience. I hesitated. I wasn't one for standing on a stage, recounting my wounds like a performance. But then I realized, if I stayed silent, my story would lose its value. And more than anyone, I knew silence was complicity. At the seminar, I wore my old green coat and stepped into the brightly lit auditorium. Over 100 people were there: students, lawyers, a few reporters, and elderly folks with trembling hands on canes, but eyes still bright with hope. When the MC introduced me, the room erupted in applause, but my legs shook slightly. I stood at the podium, looked out at the sea of faces, and began. My voice was slow but firm. I'm Miriam Jacobs, 72 years old. Before, I was an investigative reporter for the New York Times, but today I'm not here as a journalist. I'm here as a mother, a widow, and an elderly woman, once dismissed by her own family and society. The murmurs quieted. I looked at the front row, where seniors sat attentively, and continued. I was targeted by my daughter-in-law, who schemed to take my apartment. I faced a fake social worker, anonymous letters accusing me, lawyers demanding mental evaluations. I lost my only son, not to death, but to his silence, and I once believed my life was destined for darkness. I paused, letting the silence sink into the room. But then I discovered something. We are not weak. We just need to be heard. The applause roared. I saw seniors wipe tears. Students nod, reporters scribbling nonstop. My voice grew steadier. The elderly are not burdens. We are memories, foundations. But if society treats us as commodities to be traded, as numbers in real estate contracts, then future generations will fall into that same cruel cycle. Justice has no age, and we, the elderly, have the right to live with dignity. The room erupted again. I saw determination in their eyes. Then I spoke about the Guardian Project, about the desperate letters I received, a woman in Queens who lost her home because her daughter forced her to sign papers, a man in New Jersey tricked into selling land for medical care. I told them about the anonymous letter in my main mailbox, with a USB full of evidence, like an invisible hand passing me the duty to continue. I cannot stay silent. I don't want to live my final years in regret, and I believe no one in this room should stay silent either. The truth only survives when we speak up. This time the applause wasn't just loud, it lingered, like an unending melody. I bowed my head, my eyes stinging but my heart ablaze. At that moment, from the stage, I looked to the back of the room. Among hundreds of faces, I recognized a familiar figure, Andrew. He stood silently, not approaching, not calling my name. His eyes were heavy with regret, his posture that of a man who'd lost everything. For a second, my heart tightened. Memories flooded back. The boy running circles in the park, shouting, "Mom, wait for me," the child who hugged me during storms, whispering, "You're my superhero, Mom." Part of me wanted to run down, embrace him, forgive everything. But then images flashed. Andrew sitting in the apartment, silent as Rachel presented fake papers. Andrew signing the loan, using my home as collateral. Andrew admitting he knew but dismissed it as just talk. I took a deep breath and turned away. I knew that to truly let go, I had to accept. Andrew had left me long ago. I was no longer fighting to keep my son by my side. I was fighting for justice, and that was enough. The speech ended. The room stood, applause thundering. I left the stage, not looking back at the figure in the back. That night, in my small hotel room, I opened my familiar notebook. A fresh page waited. I wrote, "I'm no longer just an investigative reporter, but I still have eyes to see the truth and a heart to fight for justice. That will be my final legacy for those who come after me, for this world." I set the pen down, closed the notebook. Outside, Washington glowed with lights, the Potomac shimmering in the dark. I smiled. For the first time in years, I felt completely free. And with that freedom, I knew one thing for certain. Miriam Jacobs, the woman once cast out by her own family, would never be silent again. Thank you for listening to my story of rebirth, from pain into strength. Don't forget to subscribe to join me on the next thrilling and unexpected journeys in the upcoming video.